Hello innovators, hope you guys are well. Hope you're all having a fantastic start to the week so far, and welcome back to another Crypto Outlook. Look at the markets, go and watch the previous videos and tell me what you now think. Now, as I've covered, and if you've been paying attention in the previous videos, we have seen exactly what I've been telling you would likely begin to develop within the markets. And all of those regions, from BTC to the total market cap to Ethereum and XRP, have been struck to precision in a single devastating blow on the weekly time frame, backed with what I said would be the fake black swan news. Just as the US tensions begin to escalate and Iran retaliate to the US, peace talks come through the moment BTC sweeps the 100K floor. And in that very moment, we have seen a recovery of almost $8,000 on Bitcoin. Now, this is exactly what I've been telling you would happen. Now, many of you didn't believe me, and many of you were also wondering how I suddenly turned somewhat bullish in this area. Now, I need you guys to not just start paying attention to these videos more, but I need you to go and watch the recent psychology video that I done with Bernie, based on the deception of candlesticks. I don't think we could have done that video at a better time. It literally will explain and break down exactly how these fundamental events are used to manipulate and trick you. Now, I'm going to be honest, we're not entirely in the clear. This is still a highly manipulative, heavy fundamental region. And there are still possibilities to obviously drop down again. But like I've been saying, I think it's been very simple. I think the market is going to recover. I've just been very, very cautious of one more devastating blow to the downside. As always, let's break down the psychology and narratives of what's been going on here. There are influencers screaming black swan. There is the threat of World War III. People are terrified. Now, is it ever going to be as bad as it seems when the media are publicizing everything step by step? We are essentially seeing live broadcasts of the war unfolding. They are psychologically programming you to be fearful here. And this is exactly why I've been buying. And I am now around the $150,000 in on some spot investments now into 3 coins in particular, and a couple of meme coins as well. You know, the real hedge against inflation. Buying some meme coins during this time is plausible. And since that's happened, we're up around $25,000 at the moment, which is fantastic. It's nothing to get excited about, because we are seeking larger moves. But to see that much of a profit already for myself and the members is absolutely fantastic, and a great showcase of why we buy things during the height of fear. And as always, I've still got a lot more to load into the market if we are going to see some continuous dumps. But I think the war FUD for the meantime has kind of settled the storm. I had a feeling that once we broke that psychological level, caused that liquidation and capitulation event, which is a minuscule liquidation and capitulation event, I think that has now set the tone for what I have been saying is going to be the recovery back to all-time highs. We are seeing significant altcoin strength. The BTC dominance has also struck the target I gave you in the previous video. And I would not be surprised if we start to see the BTC dominance plummet and provide altcoins some temporary relief. There are some very exciting prospects ahead of us, and I do still think the worst is to come. But of course, as a trader and an investor, we have to understand how to adapt during these times. And the significant overload of heavy fundamentals that we've been seeing flipped me into somewhat of a more short-term to medium-term bullish standpoint. I think we're on the cusp of a recovery here, and in fact, you can now see exactly what I've told you has actually come through and happened. There was that little warning risk of that possibility, and it happened, and we've now got that. So for me right now, I am beginning to pursue a higher time frame recovery of the market over the course of the end of June moving into July. And hopefully you guys have been paying attention, because it would have stopped you getting shaken out. And like I said, provided some fantastic opportunities if you were waiting for that particular movement. Now we've seen the shakeout, the likelihood is the market will begin to see more of a recovery than what we've already seen. We're still in a range, bear that in mind, on a weekly time frame, and I would probably still be open to one more drive down, which would be nothing more than an additional benefit at this point. I think the market is going to develop a much bigger trap later down the line. And like I've said, a black swan never ever happens when everyone's expecting it. And we can now see that. It was a fake black swan. It was the narrative of a black swan that contributed to people capitulating. Now, if we start to see a recovery, what you are now going to see is the very same people calling a black swan will flip bullish and tell you new highs, and start setting out those crazy, unrealistic upside targets once again. When we enter that territory with a sufficient drive to the upside, that's where you want to start being scared. And that's where we're going to start considering a real black swan could possibly take place. The war is still brewing in the background, and I've had a little look at the news. I'm not a reader or watcher of the news, but honestly, if I was consuming the news and I saw all of those updates minute by minute, missile, attack, I probably would have capitulated myself as well. Another reason why I stick to the raw price action. I understand where the market can go, and I understand that the fundamentals will be the contributing factor to price reaching those levels that you may think is unrealistic. We have ticked every checkbox that we have been waiting for. So for me right now, my eyes remain on the upside, and we'll be breaking that down further in the charts. And as promised, weekly updates at the very least. You guys are hopefully paying attention. I appreciate all the feedback from the previous videos as well. It means the absolute world to me. I'm very, very glad to see you guys are paying attention and beginning to understand more about market psychology in the process as well. So it goes without saying, we're going to jump into the charts and continue right where we left off with some very exciting updates. Now, we have seen an absolutely beautiful turnout from what we've been tracking over the past 2 weeks. And as I've been covering, whilst we've been in a very uncertain area, and unfortunately, until we actually break out of this range, we're still in a very uncertain area. But there's one thing I've been actively tracking for you guys and keeping you vigilant for, and that was the FUD-driven shakeout that I believed many people would perceive as the black swan. And this is again where key psychological programming comes into play within the market. As I've been saying, every single influencer calling for a black swan. All of a sudden, these people are sharing so much FUD, it's giving me a run for my money. Even I have not spread this much FUD before. This is like Torre at all-time high territory, like never before. These people have exceeded me in every way, shape and form. And that's what scared me more. When people spread more FUD than me, that's when you know we're probably going to go higher. Now, the characteristics of what we've seen open up a huge framework of opportunities here now. More importantly, if you look at what has happened and where we've been looking for, every single level struck absolutely perfectly. Beautiful, and what a reversal we've seen thus far. This has ticked numerous boxes for me, and whilst this area remains uncertain, I think this definitely opens the doors for a much larger drive. Now, we already know we're looking at the idea of these coins, number one, coming back to local levels of resistance, which is, of course, BTC somewhere up in the vicinity of around $110,000. And again, going back to the previous video where I showed that chart from a perfect 108, 109 down into the 100K threshold and back up to 110, it's looking incredibly plausible. And we now want to consider what could happen in this area with the BTC dominance, which I did highlight in the previous video, because I do believe the BTC dominance is beginning to reach a region where it is going to start pulling back down and possibly provide some relief for the altcoins as well. So if we look at the most local levels of resistance across the board, well, of course, you want to immediately look at F coming back to 2550 to 2700. You want to be looking at XRP coming back into that kind of 2.4, 2.5 range. But the big missing piece and key element of this puzzle thus far, for me, is the fact that the total market cap remains in this open void. And like I've been highlighting, before we get down, we just want to watch for a crash that people will deceive as a black swan. People will capitulate, and we have seen a vast amount of long liquidations come through. Now, Lord behold, something I also highlighted to the members in a massive breakdown of text. I do not look at the news much. I don't read the news. I don't watch the news. I don't care for the news. Because as you can see, the levels I've given you, as always, the news has sufficiently delivered in a very arguably timely manner. I put a message out and an update to the members saying that we are targeting the 100K region, which I'll bring up on the screen and show you. And I highlighted that I would not be surprised if once that happens, you very quickly start to see talks of peace or a ceasefire. Lord behold, the moment we struck these lows over here, talks of a ceasefire emerged. Now, the recovery for me is absolutely beautiful and arguably a key indication now that BTC is going to do, hopefully, exactly what I've been saying. My only question at this point is where altcoins go. If we look at the total market cap's room to the upside, I think there is a huge potential here to drive up into that region once again. And if we're very lucky, take out those highs like I've been saying. Now, the key is I don't necessarily know what Bitcoin would do in this instance, but I do still think it's possible to take out its highs. Obviously, we're back in this range. It's not ideal. We're at the 50% point right now as well. But I think altcoins could possibly surprise us. I'm up around 25k or so at the moment across the board on a whole series of different buys, a few leverage positions as well. Really happy stuff so far. You know, from the smallest of movements on some of those altcoins me and the members have got into, we're seeing some fantastic results already, and it's beginning to become very exciting. If we look at the severity of the crash, in the grand scheme of things, minimal, absolutely minimal. Like, it's not a big crash. It's just a key rejection of local support. But for most people with the conviction and fear underlying from the war, it has obviously shaken them out entirely. And I think this could be the key here, with a lot of people now capitulating and a lot of major long liquidations cleared. I would assume the market is going to provide some form of relief. The only real problemo we have at the moment is the monthly candles. And what we need to be waiting for here is obviously how these monthly candles close. As we highlighted in the previous video, it is a sheer hot monstrosity and mess. You've got BTC stranded in this region right now with a massive, massive doji candle. You've got the total market cap as a doji. Everything right now is doji galore. The weeklies have been doji galore, and this is the first real breakout we've seen in a couple of weeks, but the monthlies are also dojis. And of course, when dojis form, you have to generally assess the prospects of both sides. But I would say with the current sweep to the downside we've seen, this could be enough that if something worse is going to happen, like I've been saying, a real black swan is going to take place at a time where few believe it's going to happen. Like I said in the previous video, a black swan does not happen when everyone's telling you a black swan is about to happen. That has never happened before. Now, you can argue that due to the fact we have access to a lot more data and a live stream of the news, that yes, you theoretically could almost determine when a black swan is, but that's not true, because COVID was a black swan. FTX was a black swan. We all had access to information, yet very few people were able to predict such a thing. And the truth is, when the news is telling you what you want to hear, or what you don't want to hear in this instance, and you think you've got all the information that reassures you that yes, we are going to go lower, the likelihood is the market is deploying that trap. And I would argue it's not a coincidence that Mr. Trump has now come out and basically asked for peace. It's a very strange ordeal. He almost like comically mocked Iran and kind of said, you know, weak attempt, but hey, at least they gave us a heads up. I find that very strange. I think what we should be looking for right now is a sentiment shift, a shift from fear back to greed. And that's where we really want to assess dangers that could begin to develop in the market. I think the key to that here is seeing the market drive up back into that all-time high territory. We need to see everyone that's just been swiped and liquidated shift back to bullish. And what could be very hopeful with this possibility is the idea that altcoins could see one more surge. I have a weird feeling it could happen by the end of the month. It's a very optimistic thing, but what could enhance this possibility is the fact that obviously we have just swiped the lows. We've held up on our regions very well, so logically with lows wiped, you want to see the highs wiped next. Now, of course, BTC does not have that much higher to go. So what I'm almost thinking is, could this be predominantly an altcoin contribution? Could the altcoins be playing a role here to surge these further and surge the total market cap into this region, if not flush the high? As you know, my target still remains this region down below. And I think we're going to get that before anything truly beautiful does begin to develop. It's going to the total market cap chart. You know, even seeing that move there, isn't it funny how many people all of a sudden started calling for these targets like 80k and 60k? But yet when I was saying it up here and over here, no one was taking it seriously. People are reactionary. This is not really even a technical video for that matter. This is a psychological video for that matter, because we're still in a range and I've already broken down what I think is going to happen and it's playing out perfectly. You need to understand that the people that are the voice of reasons allegedly are commonly lying to you. If they are not paid to share these opinions, they are taking their opinions from the general majority of people who are losers. Why is it everyone is willing to accept over here that we are going to $80,000 when the week before we were at $105,000? From 105 to 98k, people start looking at 80k and 60k and suddenly look at the levels I was saying there seriously here. That should tell you everything you need to know. And that's why I think some form of trickery could be emerging in this region, and there is still a chance this monthly could even take out the high before the end of the month in the next 6 days. I think there is a good chance this weekly could be quite a bullish candle. We don't know for certain, but I think we have the framework. If you look at the bulk of the fears right now, there is always a slim chance that there could be a halt in the ceasefire and the peace talks don't end up as peaceful. The truth is, Mr. President Trump is a volatile man right now and has been since he stepped into office. In fact, things have not gone too well since Trump has come into play. And as a matter of fact, if you look back over here, remember everyone preaching the pro-crypto president, the savior, the holy savior of crypto. Well, that hasn't really been the case ever since he's come into power. And a lot of people are now shifting against Trump due to his actions and the tariffs and everything else. I think we're in a great area here where inevitably the downside prospects are seemingly worsening. But I'm just not too certain we're going to get such a thing without the market really deploying a much larger trap, which is of course beneficial to those who are adequately positioned off the base of fear. I think we have a lot lower to go, but whether we get there without any form of stupidity is another question in itself. A lot of people have shifted the scope lower. That tells me the market likely needs to see some form of strength and recovery. My biggest dreaded fear, of course, is we end the months with entire dojis and everything just ends very flat and standstill. The key here to understand is what happens with altcoins, of course, because we still know these lower levels are incredibly present and risky. My main question is, will the market drop from here and nuke those altcoins to the ground without a significant catch-up coming through and without a complete sway of sentiment into greed? Right now, my eyes are set back on those all-time highs, and I hope they can come through because there will be some prosperous opportunities for those who have looked to leverage the dip. My ideology in this area is really very, very simple at this point. Not looking at coins like Ethereum or XRP, because obviously you would have to be a psycho to buy in these regions. Even if they go up, the risk to reward is just not on your side, and you have a huge amount of downside room to look at in these areas. If you buy at these prices, there is always a grave danger, and I would argue a short-term possibility of going up to there, or even 4K, is not really worth the risk of buying in those prices. I will never touch things in these regions. I normally exit things in these regions as I've done with XRP. But if we look at this level, right now I would say max pain is actually pushing up further than most people can believe. This would be the perfect ploy, and in fact it's exactly what I mentioned and showed you over here. With what we've seen historically, you have this overall range in play. The market kind of comes in and liquidates, strikes through, everyone sells, and then we tackle the highs. And I would absolutely not be surprised, whether it is by the end of this month or moving into next month, if BTC goes in for those highs again. This could be a rather beautiful scenario, because not only does the total market cap give us a very open road for how that's possible with a simple trendline rejection, if not a push through to the highs, but this also opens the doors here where BTC profit taking could be initiated in very large quantities. And I would say with the initial shake up in play from here, if we were to see a much larger surge on BTC, it could very well then begin to create the top area, which of course would begin to create the developments for the possibility of really squeezing back down into this threshold, at the very least into the lower end of the 90s. Now the question here is, of course, is if we see this movement upwards and BTC drives up to this level and begins to pull back down, what this could cause is a drop in the BTC dominance. This could then indicate that a major amount of BTC profits are being taken off the table. If we see something like that, that provides an open door for altcoins over the course of the end of this month, moving into possibly July, to have a much larger catch-up. This will allow them to fall from a higher standpoint. The key is to look at where these areas will go. We've obviously got a select few coins we've been scaling into now, which have already started showing some incredible promising signs. There is still more downside risks, and of course my eyes have not changed from the key lows of 80k, and obviously a breakdown even further. But as the initial phase is now complete here, I think we could be in store for a surprise recovery. This will shift the sentiment to bullish. This will be where all of those people that just told you about a black swan will change their minds entirely and start calling for new highs. They will flip bias most likely if we see this. And this would generally then be the area that something worse happens. So if you now look at this and what's happened, I would say the market has very likely priced in the idea of a World War III. And we wanted to see a bit of that US escalation to really ramp things up a little bit more, because that's where fear comes in. You know, for the sake of Iran and Israel, well, a lot of people look at that and go, well, it's not going to impact me. But when US start to get involved, Russia starts to get involved, the UK start indicating they're going to get involved, people as always begin to shart their pants, a very famous terminology I like to use to represent the average retail trader mindset. With that storm kind of settled, I would say the market has possibly factored in the bulk of that in the meantime. And to deploy the next actual possible black swan, or something far more sinister that can bring us into that 80k region, we need to convince everyone that we are back. And that is normally where the magic happens. A great example of that is over here. Now, I don't recall if I was making the videos at that time, but I was very active on X. And of course, with the members saying the same sort of thing. And you can really see a clear illustration of this before, of how market manipulation operates and functions at the highest, most meditated level. We can see here, the market created a series of lows. A high is created here. Bearing in mind, this was the Trump presidency entry. This was like the WWE entrance. The market comes in, sweeps those lows. All the longs get liquidated. Look at how it strategically did not flush those lows for weeks on end, accumulating long position after long position. Going over here, longs, longs, longs. Where are they going to place those lovely liquidations and stop losses? They're going to place them below those range lows. Chasing every pump, chasing every pump, chasing every pump. The same is applicable exactly where we are now. And it looks somewhat identical in many, many ways. You have a high over here that has remained rather outstanding, to say the very least, and creates a huge catalyst for short liquidations to build up. It's a double-edged sword, if you think about it here, and this is why I'm very optimistic that the market should, could, and hopefully would be pursuing these highs before anything catastrophic actually happens. The key to that is understanding the narrative and storylines we've seen. So since here, a whole load of people have jumped in long. The bulk of those liquidations have been cleared time and time again, with the more notable one being the recent rally from here. Of course, do you think people long from here? No, they don't. They long from those bullish candles. Stop losses would be below those lows. As we drive up, more longs enter the game. Flushed out here, spike up to there. More longs enter on the bullish candle there, with liquidations below and liquidations below, because everyone is targeting the all-time highs. Simultaneously, as this is happening, who's got the free ride right now? It seems to be shorters. I'm not sure why this is different colors, but as this is crashing, you already know everyone that's shorting is placing their liquidations and stop losses above this level. For me, it seems pretty clear at the moment that the market has come in with the simple objective of flushing out all of the longs and driving in fear. What is the market likely going to pursue at this point, and what could the consequences be of such an action? The likelihood is, if it starts to drive up to here, the sentiment is engineered to look in the opposing direction. Can you imagine, in this instance, if the altcoins begin to make some form of recovery? This could be the framework where we have, how many days left till monthly closure? We have 6 days. The optimistic Torre, which you don't see often, by the way, may I add, it's rare for me. Normally, I would stick to my bias because overall I think we're going to go down. But I'm quite enjoying the process here of giving you the up and down swings that I think are going to take place, because it's shocking a lot of people, number one, but also just shows you how to adapt to these circumstances. At the core of it all, my eyes remain fixated lower. I think it could theoretically be a rather large bull trap, of some form. It could be a very significant bull trap to really create the major leg lower that then begins to bring a much larger move to the upside there as well. But the optimistic Torre right now wants to see a very big weekly candle closure to the upside, ideally a very bullish candle closure. And I think it is possible. Of course, I cannot say for certain. I do not control this market, unfortunately, as much as I wish I did. But the optimistic Torre at the moment thinks there is a chance that these weekly candles, if all goes accordingly, could possibly bolster up by the end of the week. This would then lead to hopefully a break of the dojis. No more dojis, for the love of God, because if we end up with monthly dojis, we have to continue assessing the damage on both sides, because then there is a new wick to target up above and a new wick to target down below, which obviously opens numerous threats and numerous risks. But in the core, simplistic side of things, the optimistic Torre at the moment remains hopeful that the market will return by the end of the month and the end of the week, bearing in mind what we know and what you guys now know. You know that most often when we get to critical weekly, monthly closures, specifically when the halfway point of 2025, the bell is about to be rung. 2-month closures, 3-month closures, 6-month closures. This is where the market is often most susceptible to end of closure manipulation, which means what you may have seen just now over the past few days could have been the fatal, devastating blow before reversing in the opposing direction, which will completely set the scope for what could be happening. Of course, my biggest shivering, terrifying thought is we see more closures like this, because there is numerous levels of danger that amass with that, and that will require some continued and additional assessments. But at the moment, my projections remain rather hopeful that the market could be pursuing a bigger drive. We're going to see how these levels play out. Of course, if something crazy happens in the next 6 days, I will provide another video before that, but this is more of an update to continue once again on where I left you in the previous video, which was to watch out for these strikes to be backed by some form of FUD, and Lord behold, did we get them levels to perfection. So now that they've been fulfilled, I'm going to stick to my guns and say that the market could very well be pursuing those highs one more time. The question is what happens to altcoins here. Do they manage to catch up, or do they remain constrained? If they remained constrained in where they're currently trading, they are susceptible to significantly larger drops. I do not see that as a fearful sign. And I also remain completely to my guns that whatever the hell is happening here in this ongoing ordeal of chop, 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 I think this is the creation of an alt season. Now, I don't personally feel that XRP is going to do much more. I think at best you may get $4 out of this thing. I don't know, but I don't necessarily like it. I think it has more possibility. It could wick the high one more time, absolutely. But I don't think it's got that much more of a leg. I could be wrong, but I really think the star of the show here is going to eventually be Ethereum. I think Ethereum and various others that are yet to really do what the rest have done are going to become the star of the shows. I think the real key to this is obviously seeing some form of sweep to the downside first. It's just, are we going to get the bull trap before the sweep to the downside. That would be the beautiful key to seeing everything begin to materialize in real time. Most of those that have already done the bulk of the movements that we've seen, such as XRP, generally do tend to have a capped amount of upside. That's something worth noting. It's normally those that are yet to do what XRP has done, or various others like XRP, that take the front run of the show. Then if you look at it plausibly, well, if BTC is to be near the end point of its cycle, which it very well could be, we have historically not necessarily seen the cycles end without that alt season, of course, like I've been saying. So any form of shake-up that does occur here is likely the catapult for the finale of altcoins to start making that rally. And obviously right now, whilst everyone's distracted, it's almost like a pre-black swan before a greater black swan could emerge. Shake everyone out entirely. I don't know if that's going to happen without bringing in the FOMO, of course. And then the real magic obviously happens. I think F is going to be the star of the show, and I remain very optimistic for that. The fundamentals we're seeing right now should not necessarily be feared. As long as you are positioned in the correct prices on the right coins, you do not have much to fear, because there is good drawdown and there's bad drawdown. The question you want to ask yourself is, would you want to hold drawdown on BTC from $105,000, knowing how much room it has down to go? Especially if there was to be a bear market here, which you know already, if there's a bear market, this is going back to 20, 30K. What do you want from BTC at this point? There isn't much for it to necessarily give. What you want to have your eyes on is what hasn't done what BTC has done, what hasn't moved in the way BTC has done. That's where the money lies. Unless you are dealing with millions and millions of dollars, BTC is not for you anymore. It is not for the average person. Unless you have the size to play this thing, there is really no joy in buying BTC and holding. The money always comes for the mere mortal that isn't institutional. It comes from altcoins, and you need to look at those that have moved and think, right, well, how much more is that going to move? And is it plausible and justifiable for me to even look at considering buying these things? Not necessarily, unless they trade from a fairer standpoint, which the recent shockwave of the news has delivered on a handful of coins, which of course I've decided to start buying. But when I do look here, I think again, we could be in for a surprise in the next 6 days. I hope that is the case, because it would be fun to see some beautiful, beautiful profits emerge before any form of mass destruction. I would ideally like to see, of course, the pump, because it allows altcoins to fall from a higher standpoint. It means they do not have to die completely to the ground. I'm obviously welcome to see such a thing, because it will be very, very profitable indeed if you're not scared and positioned accordingly. But to keep it short and sweet right now, all the main targets to the downside have been struck. Right now, we want to be keeping our eyes on what could very well be a surprise by the end of the week, moving into July, to start targeting those highs again. I'm quite hopeful here, and if we can get this, we are going to be in for some real treats, some real treats.